started, I think, our third or fourth community academy for the year. Safety protocols are one of the topics that families said in the past that they wanted to learn about. We have some new ones, and so we thought it was a great opportunity to share them with you so you know what your kids experience at school, but also know what to anticipate if there was a drill or if there was an actual emergency. I want to introduce Russ Robinson, and I think I got your title wrong before, so why don't you tell us what your title is?
I am the school safety supervisor for the school district.
I think I used coordinator and director
Yeah.
a few different times. And I'm Bethany Barrett. I'm one of the assistant principals. The rest of the team is in the room as well. Sonia Cole, principal. Mike Kudo, assistant principal. So glad you're here. Okay, and then right after this is a PTA meeting, so stay for the PTA meeting. So Russ and I are going to take this together. So we'll just be going back and forth, answering questions and letting you know what this is all about. So here's kind of our agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about where our protocols are from, what they are. These are the 5 protocols we're going to walk you through. We're going to spend some extra time on the lockdown, which is a bit more nuanced than it's been in the past. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. So if you are someone who likes to use the electronic version of questions, you can just point your phone at this QR code and you can drop a question in there. Or I scattered some Post-it notes around, and you're welcome to write Post-it notes. It's also a small crowd, so we might be able to do this in person for a Q&A. But if you want to, you can take the picture of the QR code if you want to use your phone. Okay, you can always come back to it. All right, so I'm going to hand this part over to Russ. Talk to us about why we adopted these new safety protocols, where they're from, etc.
So we actually really just kind of updated our safety protocols. So we've always kind of been using the same 4 basic protocols: the lockout, lockdown, shelter in place, and evacuate. And without really even knowing it, we were using the I Love You Guys Foundation's original protocols that they created in like 2005, something like that. And we, just some things, when I took over the position, actually it was 3 days into this position when we had some things go down at Seahome with a bunch of lockdowns in a row. So that summer I spent some time reviewing our protocols, looking at what is out there, and that's where I actually found out that we were using the I Love You Guys Foundation program. We just, 1, didn't credit them, and 2, we haven't updated it with what they currently practice. So I flew over to Denver, looked at their protocols at their summer briefing, really liked it. It's very simple, very plain language, but also very research-based. They went and did their research. This is what a lot of schools throughout the U.S. as well as internationally are now using, and it's something that we decided as a county that we're going to go to countywide. So all 7 public school districts in the county are shifting to the new I Love You Guys protocols. Any kid that works in any school in any of our districts will have common language. They'll already know it, right? We have a lot of moving around within the county. So they don't have to learn new protocols if they go out to Ferndale or come from Ferndale to us. Also, Walker Community College is already using these. I got a phone call from Western 2 weeks ago that they want to shift to this as well. BTC is already moving this direction. So a lot of our students stick around for college and they'll already know this protocol. It'll follow them all the way through. So that's kind of some of the big reasons why we decided to shift. And like I said, it is very research-based. The creators of the I Love You Guys Foundations lost a daughter in a school shooting at Platte Canyon in Colorado. And so they really dove into this work. They're not about, all of their stuff is free. They're not about making money off of this. They're really about how can we protect kids so what happened to our daughter doesn't happen to anybody else. And so that's really what kind of hooked me in. And then reading it and engaging with them, as well as engaging with our sheriff's department and BPD, kind of realized this is something that we should really shift to.
And they took a lot of their safety protocols from the Sandy Hook Commission, which, if you're familiar with that, it's the report that was put out by a board of folks who did a lot of research after the Sandy Hook shootings, and made recommendations for school safety. So that's also some of the research that it's built on. Okay, so we're going to just jump right in and talk through the first couple holds, and then we'll spend a little bit more time on the lockdown. So our first hold is a new one. This is one that we did not have in the time that we did all of those lockdowns in a row a couple of years ago. And it's one we would have used if we'd had it. So this is actually a really great thing to have a protocol that is aimed at, like, there's something going on in the building, there's nothing dangerous, we don't have to worry about our safety, but we just need students to stay in their classrooms because we need the hallways open. It could be somebody vomited in the hallway and it's got to get cleaned up. Or it could be that there's a leak and there's water, there's like a flood in the science hallway. Or it could be that there's some kind of an investigation going on, the police are on campus, and we just need everyone to be in their classrooms so that it's easier for them to do their job. So it could be any of those kinds of things, but the most important action is just that everyone stays in the classroom. But the lights are on, people can learn, there's an opportunity if you really have to go to the bathroom, you can call the main office and there can be sort of an escorted plan for folks to use the facilities if they need to. If someone's in the wrong room and they really need to be somewhere else to be supported better, we can move people around that way. And this is a really helpful protocol to have. And I would imagine that if we were to go through what we went through a couple of years ago, we would never go to a lockdown, we'd use this kind of a protocol, which is also it's much more settling for students than to go through a lockdown protocol. So this is what they'd hear over the intercom: hold in your classroom. We give them the information we can. There's a spill in the science hallway, we need to get it cleaned up. We'll let you know when it's time to go to your next class. So that's a hold protocol. Anything more to say about that?
No, as Bethany was saying, this is one where I kind of fell in love because it was 3 days after I took the job. I'm like, man, I wish we would have had this in our protocols, because there's a lot of times where it's not heightened to the level of a lockdown where people are in danger. It's just, you know what, we got to figure out what's going on. Or the throw up in the hallway is a big one, because if you're in elementary school, the first thing kids do when they see throw up is also throw up, right? So then you have a bigger mess, right? So it's a common protocol that could happen for a lot of various different reasons. It's typically not safety related.
Okay, so our next protocol is a secure. And we have had to use this a couple different times. Different schools have to use it throughout the year. And it's when something's happening around the outside of the school that would cause us to need to just stay inside. So for example, we get a call from the police that there's someone robbed the corner 7-Eleven and they haven't found the person yet. And so they tell neighborhood schools, please go into secure. So we secure the outside of the school and we just go along as normal until the police let us know that they apprehended the person and we're free to go about our business normally. Or it could be that there's a bear on the field and we gotta take care of the bear so that everyone's safe to go outside. Or it could be that there's a forest fire on the Seahome Arboretum Hill. And so they gotta contain the fire before we can do anything, so they don't want anyone leaving the campus. So we secure the outside of the building, all the exterior doors. We don't let anyone come or go, but we just carry on as usual. Bells ring, kids go from class to class, and we communicate with our community what's happening, so families know, students know, staff know, and we're all safe inside until it gets lifted by whoever first told us to put this protocol in place.
This one's probably going to be one of the most common here at Seahome because we have Western so close, and a lot of things can happen on their campus. If they go into some kind of safety protocol, we'll probably as well. Same thing with Happy Valley, right down there. So typically this is going to be probably one of our most common at this school. But also it's what we used to call a lockout. And we changed, or I love you guys changed the language, because lockout, lockdown, too similar. This is typically, you're safe in here, out there is where the danger is. We want to keep you in the safe area. Again, we don't want to elevate it to the level of there's danger in the school. We're keeping kiddos safe in our buildings. We're just making sure nobody goes outside. We're continuing to learn. It's very similar to a hold in that situation. We're going to keep doing things normally inside the building. We're just not going to do anything outside.
And so we train students, if you have a PE class and you're on the field and a hold is called, you come inside. As opposed to a lockdown, which we'll talk about. If you're outside, you leave campus. You don't come back in a building if there's a lockdown. So for a hold, there's directions that both students and staff have around what to do when a hold is called. And the other thing that I didn't mention at first, but is will be true for any protocol, is that the district office will start immediately sending out student, staff, and family communications via Parent Square. So if you're not connected to Parent Square, you'll want to make sure that you do that. We can talk about that afterwards. But every 15 minutes, they'll update you. C-Home continues to be in a secure protocol. And they'll give you whatever information they can. And every 15 minutes, you'll get that update. And we've had schools go into some protocols already this year and know that this is already a protocol that the district office is practicing. So that's really good news for us. Okay, the next one is an evacuation drill. It's like a fire drill. We practice it every year. Students and staff know that when the fire alarm rings, we all go down to the lower field. We have a process for where you stand, how you get your attendance taken. And that's the most common reason why we would use an evacuation drill is for a fire. And we have not had to experience that in this school. I don't know if any district or any school in our district has had to have a fire during the school day. But if the fire alarm is how people would know. There's also a public announcement that goes out. If it was not a fire alarm, but it was like a hazardous spill, let's say, in a science lab, and we needed to evacuate a gas leak, then we would actually get over the PA and say, evacuate the building, go to whatever. And in our case, it's always the lower field unless it was something different because of a different reason. But we haven't run across that, but we would be told where to go. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, this would only change as if we're in a different protocol. So if we're insecure and the fire alarm goes off, we're not going to evacuate unless there's actual fire or smoke or that kind of stuff. Obviously, there's danger outside. We don't want to go outside into the danger unless we absolutely have to. I mean, if we do have to, we will, and we'll find ways to keep our kiddos safe by having law enforcement on site, that kind of stuff. But, other protocols can override and evacuate in that mindset of, oh, the fire drill's going off, I just have to leave. So.
Okay, our fourth drill is our shelter-in-place drill. And this would be if there's a tsunami, which in C-Home's case, probably not a dangerous thing to experience here, but a volcano eruption, a dangerous chemical somewhere, an earthquake is the most likely one. So in that case, there's a couple different protocols. Obviously, if it's an earthquake, we practice the drop, cover, and hold. And so we practice that with students. They climb under a secure item, they hold on to it until the shaking stops, and we give them all those directions. If it was a tsunami, the directions would not be to get under a table, they would be to go to higher ground. If it was some kind of a hazardous spill, then there would be folks that come on site to seal vents and doors and windows and things like that. So each one's a little different, but the shelter in place just gives us a different drill to use when all the other ones are not the right ones. Anything more about that?
Typically, a shelter-in-place drill will typically be followed by an evacuation, earthquake, that kind of stuff. We have to make sure the building's structurally sound, that kind of thing. So these two are coupled together quite a bit.
Okay, so now we're going to spend a little bit more time in the lockdown. So a lockdown drill, because we have all the other drills, is a really narrowly focused drill. In the past, a lockdown was kind of like the default for anything that was like, ooh, we don't know what's happening, let's go into lockdown. But now we have the hold and we have the secure, and so a lockdown really is only used when there is danger on the campus. And I also just want to say, this is a very hard thing to imagine, and I'm sure as parents, it's hard to imagine that your kid is like walking through these drills, much less worried about something that's actually happening. And your feelings, your sentiments are shared by every staff member in this building, by all the students in this building. So know that while, I have given this presentation like 40,000 times this week, and so it kind of rolls off my tongue, but it's not because like we are desensitized to how real this is and how scary it feels. So and we'll talk about sort of how we care for the community in the midst of something like this. But a lockdown is used when there is something actually dangerous on campus. So that could be a suspicious person, an active shooter, the report of a weapon. That's when we would use this drill. And the action is very clear and very succinct. It's, well, what they hear is lockdown, locks, lights, out of sight. And that will be repeated as many times as necessary. And that goes over the loudspeaker. And then the action is to get behind a locked door, to get out of sight, to turn the lights off, and to stay quiet. And I'm going to walk through all of this, so record your questions if you have them, because there's a lot of what ifs in this scenario. And we're going to try and cover as many of the what ifs as possible. Any more about this?
Nope.
Okay, so why would we use a lockdown? And what is sort of the thinking behind it?
Yeah, so as stated earlier, a lockdown is if there is something dangerous within our school building that we need to protect our students from. And that could be various different situations, but in America these days, the one that we automatically jump to is active shooter, right? If there's somebody on campus actively trying to harm our students, how are we going to protect our students from that threat? And the lockdown is that protocol. And again, as you said earlier, there's a lot of gray area, a lot of different scenarios that can help, or that can come up on this. This is a basic, here's what we suggest you do, and here's what we're going to do. The locked classroom door it's never been breached in a school shooting. If kids can get behind a locked classroom door, no school shooting has ever breached that door. That's not to say students haven't been harmed behind a locked classroom door, but that hasn't been breached by somebody that's trying to cause harm to students. So we want to use that. It's all about building in time barriers. 70% of these incidents are over within 5 minutes. 90% of them are over and done within 10 minutes. Now, that doesn't mean kids are reunified with their parents yet. That takes hours. But the incident itself, the threat itself, is over within 5 to 10 minutes, 90% of the time. So we want to build in time. How do we keep our kids safe for that 5 minutes? Now here at Seahome, unfortunately, we do have some data. It takes 90 seconds for an officer to get on campus. And that's awesome. That's great response time. And that's largely in part because Western's right there and they have their own police department. We've had an incident of swatting where they thought it was real and they got here as fast as they could, and it was less than 90 seconds from when the call came into dispatch to when they were arrived on campus and entered the building. So we need to buy that 90 seconds. It's going to take somebody a lot longer than 90 seconds to try and get through a locked classroom door. So let's utilize those. Now that's not to say everybody's going to have that option, so we'll talk about that a little bit later, but this is the best and most proven time barrier. Just close that door, lock it, get your kids out of sight and away from home.
Okay. So this is the procedure we give our students and our staff when there's a lockdown, and this is what we'll practice on Friday with students and staff. So the student directions are to get out of sight, to get into a room that has a locked door and to not open that door for anyone. To stay out of the sight of corridor windows, so if people can see in, then if you can see out, then people can see in. To stay silent, to silence their phones, and like I said, not open the door for anyone. For teachers, it's similar. Get students out of sight, lock and close the door, turn out the lights, leave the exterior shades alone, maintain silence, and take attendance. Now, when we talk students through this, the questions that often come up are, what if I can't get behind a door, right? What if I'm in a hallway? What if I'm in the bathroom? What if it's in passing period? What if, so many what ifs about what if it's not during the class that I've practiced this in? So what we know is that the locked door is the most proven barrier against any kind of threat. There are lots of spaces in this building that have doors that can be shut and locked. Not just classrooms. So we tell students, and staff, find whatever space you can behind a locked door. And if you can't find a locked door, then either self-evacuate, get off campus, or find a good hiding place. And it's a terrifying thing to think that you would be in that position, but knowing it's been fascinating because a couple of years ago we went through so many lockdowns and it triggered so many questions and anxiety for students about like all these what ifs that they had no answers to. No one told them, if I'm not behind a locked door, I can leave. It was like, I gotta find a place inside this building that doesn't feel safe. And so we actually surveyed our students and staff and asked them to send us their questions, and had a couple of students who were really passionate about school safety and wanted to be a part of the solution. And we went through those questions and we did a Q&A with Russ this morning actually during anchor class. And the students got to ask Russ these questions and he answered them. And I'll make sure you get that video because we recorded it. But it's great. They're great questions that students ask about, like, what if this scenario? What if this scenario? What if this scenario? And there's there's an answer for everything. It doesn't always feel like a great answer. Like sometimes it feels like a scary answer even though there's an answer. But the fact is, like, talking about it and having students feel like the question was asked and they got an answer for it feels much more settling than to just wonder, like, what if I'm in the bathroom? Well, if you hear something outside the bathroom that doesn't feel safe, stay in the bathroom and, like, shut yourself in the stall. So it's not just about, like, I have to go to my teacher's classroom and get behind a locked door. It's what do I need to do? How do I look at my situational awareness around me and make the best decision for myself in this moment to stay safe? Any other?
Yeah, and those were great questions the students had. You know, unfortunately with this topic, you're not going to have the best answer in the world. Even as parents, you're not going to be able to answer that to really your own satisfaction. And that's the same way we feel. Honestly, I wish this never ever happened and I didn't ever have to talk about it. But there are answers, and the locked classroom door that's the best option. If you can do it, great, let's do it, let's keep our students safe. Not always the only option. If you're out in the hallway and you know the threat is over here, get off campus, go. And we need to give our students the ability to make that decision as well. Gives them the license to do that. Obviously, I'd love for somebody to call the school afterwards and say, hey, I got off campus, so we know where they are and we're not freaking out, but that's secondary. Primarily, get yourself safe.
And also just like remembering that what we're looking for is time barrier, right? Police get on campus so fast, and it's their job to deal with whatever threat might be causing us to go into a lockdown. So really our job is to create the best time barrier we can for that 90 seconds to 5 minutes in order for the police to be able to do their job so we can be safe. All right, so this is really different, and this is a new part of the I Love You Guys Foundation protocols, and we walk students through it. We're not gonna practice it on Friday, so you shouldn't get text messages from your students during the drill, but this is what the drill protocol asks us to do while in lockdown. So after a lockdown is called and when it's safe to do so, the teacher will instruct 5 students at a time to turn their phones on and text their families. And it's just a quick text that just says, I'm okay, I'm in a lockdown, I love you, and then turn their phones off. And then the next 5 students do that, and then the next 5, and the next 5. And when we walk students through this, a common question is, why? Why would we do that? So I'm gonna let Russ answer that question.
I mean, the biggest why is we want students to talk to their parents. We want them to let parents know, I'm okay, I'm safe. Both for them, it gives them a sense of reaching out to somebody that they care for and they love for, as well as for you guys. You aren't on campus. I get it, you're not gonna trust all the communication that comes from the district office, but you may trust your own student, and that's why we want them to do it. But unfortunately, we have a lot of data on this. One of the first things that happens during a crisis is the cell tower crashes, because it's just bombarded with all kinds of, and a lot of that is the 1,200 students in this building, right? They're not just texting you, they're on social media, they're texting everybody they know. So this helps to stretch that out, right? If we don't have all 1,200 of them at a time bombarding that cell tower, we can get maybe 3 or 4 texts to our family stretched out along that process. Ideally, and that's what they've found, is you can get 1 to 3 out to you guys. The other thing is it gives people a task. Like I said, it's gonna be over quickly, but they're gonna be stuck in that room for a long time because the police have a lot of work to do to make sure that they've dealt with the threat and to evacuate everybody from the building. So they're gonna be there for a while. So it gives them something to do to take their mind off of the fear that they're feeling, and justifiably so, right? So it gives them that lifeline. It also gives them that task to perform. And it also gives our teachers some direction to give to our students because they're going to be in the same boat, right? So they're actually doing what they do best in instructing students on a task, on something to do. So that's the why.
Okay, so big question is always like, when I'm in lockdown, what's happening outside the classroom? And here's what we know for sure. Whenever a lockdown is called, emergency responders are mobilized. And that's emergency responders from all over Whatcom County. When we had that incident happen this last year where it was a bogus threat that was called in and the police came on campus, I mean, within 10 minutes, we probably had 30 first responders, like zoom into our bus loop. Like it was we were overrun with officers and first responders from all over. So there's a lot of people that are mobilized to come deal with something when, especially if it's a lockdown in a school. We know that Western's police will probably be the first to respond. Like we said, it takes about 90 seconds for them to get onto campus. And thankfully, the district office will take over all the communication. So you're not gonna hear from Sonia and Mike and I. You're gonna hear from the district office, and if you tried calling the school, the district office will be answering those phones. So they reroute all of our phones to the district office, and they take over that 15-minute communication, updating everyone about what is transpiring and what they can tell you.
Additionally, I mean, and the swatting incident gave us a lot of, I mean, it was a terrible thing to happen, but also it gave us a lot of interesting data. Not just emergency responders. We had the Parks Department were shutting off roads by the school, and they just did that on their own. The emergency room were moving people out of operating rooms. They heard that students were injured, so they were clearing operating rooms. And so a lot of different things are mobilized when a school goes into a lockdown because of an active shooter event. And it's just kind of automatic. It does that. One thing that I wanted to mention that I don't know why I even do, because it never really actually happens, but don't come to the school. You will not be able to see your child. They will be reunified with you at a different site. Don't come here. It gets in the way, to be honest. We've got a lot of people coming to this building, and I had to fight that battle with the district office too. I had to tell them, superintendent, deputy superintendent, says, don't come to the school. I will be at the school to liaise with the police departments and that kind of stuff, and I'll talk to you while you're at the district office handling things there. And it was a tough battle, but I think I actually won it because the last couple incidents, they didn't even bother, right? So I'm giving you the same direction, knowing that probably about 70% of you are still going to come to school, but there's really no point. And I get it, you want to be close, you will not be able to see your child here. You'll be reunified at another site. We'll get them to you as quickly as we can, but it'll be a process.
Which kind of leads us to the next part, which is like, what's the process? How are we released? In the past, it used to be, you hear that there's a lockdown over the intercom, the school goes into lockdown, and then we release it just by making an announcement over the intercom saying the lockdown has been lifted. You're free to go about your business or whatever. But the directions are very different in this protocol, so we're going to walk you through that too. So what we tell everyone is only an administrator or a first responder, like the police, will release classrooms from a lockdown. So don't ever open the door for anyone. If someone knocks on the door and says they're the police, don't open the door. They will have keys to be able to get in the door. And that's true at any point during the lockdown, whether it's a second after those doors shut or whether it's an hour after you're in lockdown. Anybody who needs to be in your room will have a key to get in there. So don't open the door. This is how they'll do it. They'll knock on the door, they'll announce who they are, and then they'll unlock the door. And we're actually going to practice this on Friday. So when we go into lockdown on Friday, we're actually going to have like 7 teams of people in the building releasing classrooms one by one. So they'll see and feel what it feels like to have someone come to the door and knock and open the door. In a drill, the district staff will tell us when the lockdown is over. That's not right. In a drill, we will go to the door when the lockdown is over. It'll be a drill. And then students and staff will wait in the classroom until they hear through the PA that the lockdown is lifted. So even though we'll go to the door and say, great job, you did a wonderful job, turn the lights on, go back to your desks, like everything's fine, they still will need to stay in their classroom until they hear over the intercom that the lockdown is lifted, because it'll take us some time to just get to every single classroom. That's in a drill. In a real emergency, whoever comes to the door to release every classroom will tell the class and the people inside where to go, what to do, how to get there, what they can bring with them. And it will just be very important that everyone in that room follows the directions of the first responder that comes to their classroom.
Yeah, and this one, we won't initiate this until we are ready to evacuate students. So if we're going to an offsite location, we're not going to bring them out of the classroom until we have a bus waiting ready to take them. So they're not going to evacuate to the football field and sit there for an hour for a bus to come. We'll evacuate them immediately to wherever we're going to reunify. And also, just remember, give some grace for our first responders. If it's not a drill and they're actually doing this, they're not going to be pleasant when they're telling kids what to do. They're in a heightened mode, and also they don't know that the threat has actually been dealt with, right? They dealt with what they saw. Unfortunately, they have to treat everybody like suspects and make sure that everybody is safe. So it's typically what they'll do is have everybody hold hands rather than walk out like this. We learned that from Columbine. We don't want that. Hold hands, that way they know where everybody's hands are, and then they'll escort them out to the buses and load them on. They'll probably do a search at some point as well. So please tell your students if that's the case, just cooperate. We're not trying to break anybody's privacy rights or anything like that. And anything we're finding, we're not going to use it against them. You know, we're not looking for the dab pen. We're looking for weapons and that kind of stuff.
Just so you know, and as Russ said earlier, all of this information is forward-facing. There's no paywall on the website from the I Love You Guys Foundation for any of this. And if you go to the website and you look at the standard response protocols, there's videos that you can watch that actually show a high school practicing the release with police. So it's like a 3-minute video, and you can see what it looks like to have the police come to classrooms and release classrooms after a drill. On Friday, we will have a police officer on campus with Russ who's just going to be observing the protocol but won't be releasing classrooms. We'll be the ones releasing classrooms, so when we open the door, it's a friendly face, it's someone people know. None of us will be in uniform, we'll all, you know, be gentle and kind. Okay, so this is the other big question that students had, especially after our last round of lockdowns. It's like, what about after? Because this is a really triggering event to go through a lockdown. So how are we taking care of each other during this time? So in a drill, we will set up space for students and staff to be able to come and just decompress. Like a lot of people are in a very heightened place, and we are doing the drill in the middle of the afternoon with one more period afterwards before they go home. And so it'll give us some buffer time to be able to help students like de-escalate and regulate before they're walking out the door, driving home, or getting on the bus. So we'll have the counseling office will be available for folks to talk to if they want to. There's also just going to be space to just quietly kind of get themselves back to a space where if they can go to their final period of the day, and if they can't, that's okay. And if they need to go home, that's okay too. Like, we know that this is a very difficult thing to have to practice. In a real emergency, obviously it's a little different. If we have to leave the school campus, just like Russ said, the district office will implement a comprehensive reunification plan. And half of the training that all administrators went through at the beginning of the school year on these protocols, it was a full day, and half of that day was spent around this reunification process. So it's a really big deal, and there's a lot of very careful details that are planned out. And we're not doing it. The district office or other school districts will help us do that. And it will involve a plan that will connect you back to your kids in a safe way on an off-site location. And we never want to have to do this, but having this plan set up will allow us to be able to do this seamlessly so that we can all get back together again. If we don't need to leave the school, then we'll make a decision about what does the rest of the school day look like. Are we gonna stay in school? Are we gonna do an early release? Are we gonna modify the schedule? Are we gonna provide extra spaces, even more than we thought, to, for students to be able to regulate, like who needs a snack, who needs to go home, like what's the plan? And we'll give students and families that information about what happens next.
Yeah, and it's all planned ahead of time. Actually, we are doing a mock drill with all the school districts in June. Just like I said, hopefully we never have to do one of these for real, but we don't want the first one we do to have to be a real one. And since we're all now on the same page with protocols and everything, reunification is going to look the same, so we're all going to do a drill together. And I think Meridian actually is hosting it, so that we've done a dry run. We know how to do it, and so we're working on both aspects of this, and we're really kind of tightening this down as well. And everything we do in a reunification is done with a purpose and is student-centered. With a reunification, it's going to take time. So how do we take care of our students in that meantime before they reunify with you guys, as well as after the fact? It's a traumatic event. How can we help support the families after something has happened?
And it doesn't say this here, but we have given direction to teachers. You know, if you had that test planned or a presentation after, you know, during fourth period, reschedule it. It's not the time to ask students to do things that require a heavy cognitive load. You know, that is a very difficult thing to have to go through, and so there's just a lot of space, a lot of grace for students and staff to be able to get back to their baseline. Okay, that is the whole presentation part. I imagine that there are some questions in the room. So if you want, you can drop them in the QR code. I think Mike and Sonia are both available to look at that. If you have a card, or if you just want to raise your hand, we're a small enough group, I think, that we have until 7 o'clock, so. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, okay, so I had a couple.
Okay.
So the first one was about the, when they're doing the shelter in place. And you had said something about like leave the shades alone or whatever, and I guess my question was, like in our elementary school, when they were doing lockdowns at that time, everybody had like a black sheet of paper to put in the windows, on the doors, and so that's not something that happens here, and you don't do blind, like nothing.
What we're
So-
trying to prevent is we don't want classrooms to stand up. So
I
it's like the
understand
old
that
red
part.
card, green card. If you threw it under the door, guess
Right.
what that tells somebody?
Yeah, no.
Are you
I
talking about
agree.
exterior
Yes.
windows?
Oh, gotcha.
So
Yeah,
in a
absolutely.
lockdown, what we're saying is the threat is inside the building. It's
Okay.
not outside the building.
But what about
What you mean?
the windows on the doors and,
Yeah, it's a great question. And so when we
because how do
give,
you hide in one of those classrooms? What are you hiding? Do they all have closets? I mean, where are you hiding?
yeah, it's a great question. So today we trained students in the lockdown drill, and then we gave the second half of Anchor for teachers to show students where in the classroom they would go in the event of a drill. And the direction we're giving staff is make sure you know where in your classroom, if you look through the window that's open, you can't see anyone. And if you need to put a little piece of tape on the floor so you know that it's everyone behind this line is where we need to be, then do that. Whatever you need to do in order to be able to move there without having to think really hard. And that's honestly, that's why we drill too, right? So that we have that muscle memory of like, we're going into lockdown, this is where everyone needs to go, and then share that with all of your other classes too, because it could be that you're not gonna be in your advisory class if there's a lockdown, right? It might be a different class.
Will there be reflection in the window across from it? Because all the doors face the row of windows. If you're all hiding in this corner, you're gonna have a reflection of this corner with all the students there.
So here's one thing, and there are so many what ifs, right? What if there's, you know, and every classroom looks a little different too. So not every classroom has a window across from it that could possibly be a reflection. But what we know is we're working with a time barrier. Like what we're trying to do is create a time barrier between our safety and when first responders get on campus. If we know that most events are over between 90 seconds and 10 minutes, we're looking for a time barrier that keeps us safe within that time. Most aggressors that come into a building looking to cause harm do so with a target in mind. They're not coming in willy-nilly. So they're not also, if you think about the time it would take to walk down the hallway and peer really carefully into every single space, that's a lot of time. That is not the nature of these kinds of events. And so what we're looking for is to be out of sight of a sight view. Like if I'm walking down the hallway and I'm glancing into a classroom, I don't want to see anyone when I glance in the classroom. I'm not going to walk up to the window and like do this. It takes a lot of time to do that all the way down the hallway. And that's not the nature of what we know about these kinds of events. And so we're looking for that time barrier between when we know something is dangerous inside the building and when the first responders get to the building in order to take care of whatever the threat is, which is actually a pretty short time.
And that doesn't preclude the possibility that you would shut your blinds. There are some spaces where there's windows here, and windows here. There's no corner in the room that you can't see from one of those windows. So maybe we shut both of those and we find the spot over here. It's just dependent on the space. If you cannot find a spot in your room where you keep the blinds open and you can hide, then we're gonna have to close the blinds. What we don't wanna do is have
all the classrooms with their windows open and kids able to hide, and that one classroom that stands out. We don't want a classroom to stand out because that makes it a target. And that's what we want to do. It's like I said, like the old red card, green card, under the door thing. We stopped doing that because that told people there's somebody in that room, right? So create those time barriers, make yourself not an easy target.
One more.
Second part?
So about the reunification plan, you had said that the district has worked this out. Are parents notified of what that is beforehand, or do we just find out when it happens?
We will not announce the reunification site. What we don't want to do, and
Give somebody a heads up. Okay, that makes sense. And then just throwing this out there in case it's helpful, I had been reading something about after someone experiences traumatic events, if you play a game like Tetris, immediately within 5 minutes of the experience, it reduces your chances for getting PTSD. So just throwing that out there. It doesn't have to be Tetris, but it's any sort of mind game
That's
that
a good
makes
nugget.
you work in
Yeah.
things and feel
Yeah,
things.
to move your brain in a different way.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
because then you can't, the memories don't
Yeah, stick.
stick.
Yeah.
So just,
It's
that's it.
fascinating.
So piggybacking off of her last question, as far as the reunification at the alternate site, what's the protocol there? Are we just pulling up in our vehicles, or are we parking
It is
and walking
a-
up to identify?
yes,
It's a
you will park, you'll have to walk up,
well-orchestrated
you'll have to
event.
provide ID, and we'll have this all messaged out before we reunify the kids, but you will have to prove that you are that person's legal guardian, or at least on their emergency contacts list, in order to pick them up for the reunification site. And any students that don't have that, we'll work with police and find a way to get them to their guardian.
There will be very clear directions about where to go, where to park, signage about where to walk, how to get there, who's gonna help find your kid, where
And
you're
there
gonna
will
go after
be
that.
people
Like,
to show you every step of the way. The whole district office will be moved to the site, and they will run the reunification, because the people here are gonna be impacted, right? They'll be following with their kids with their students to the site. We don't wanna put that burden on them. We'll take that on us. Plus, they're gonna be stuck here until they get evacuated, so we'll take care of that. We'll also mess with it. We have everything already crafted. Like I said, we haven't ever had to use it yet, and we don't want our first one, so we're gonna do a full-scale exercise and hopefully tweak it and change it as needed.
So it looks like you put a lot of work into this. I really appreciate it. And I'm just curious if there's any thought about, like while the kids are in the classroom, what they're experiencing. And I know they get to call out to their families at different times, but I'm just, there's a huge span of like what people, their emotions, what they're experiencing. And are there any discussions with teachers and staff about how to help them kind of cope in the moment and like deal with whatever's going on? I'm just curious if there's any talk about that.
There's not officially, like, this is what your protocols, we also have to remember those staff members are also gonna be impacted as well. And so to give them a complex task and try, they will, just as who they are and personally and professionally, try their best to help their students in whatever way they can. But they're not gonna be able to go through a de-escalation exercise full scale with an entire group of students. So personally, I'm gonna rely on that staff member to do what they can, given what just happened to them as well. And the same cell phone procedures for the students apply to our staff members. Let your loved ones know. Please let your loved ones, because that's a lifeline for them too. And that's a good thought. I haven't ever really thought about this is what we want our staff to do. I just worry about putting too much on them in that situation. And yeah, so that's something we'd have to think through. I'll work with our director of mental health services on that.
And
Yeah.
the protocol is also for the classroom to be quiet, you know, and so I think it really depends on the scenario, like if the threat has been lifted, but we're all still in a lockdown, it looks very different than if you're still actively hiding. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, you know, we talk about this, I feel like every time we have a parent night or whatever, but the emphasis we put on the sense of belonging that students have and those relationships with teachers is really vital. And it comes into play in moments like this where, kids are looking at adults to be their, sort of regulation, their safe place, and staff are looking at students because they have relationships with them too. Like, it's a two-way street in situations like that. And so I just think about how important those relationships are in moments like this, and that just makes it even more, it makes that relationship building during the year even more important. You know, so that I know that when I'm in this space, I can trust the people that are in there with me. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think I was thinking mostly about when like the immediate threat is over and
Yeah.
when they're, because a couple of years ago, right, they were in their classrooms for so long.
Yeah.
And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so just kind of being together and relying on those relationships.
Yeah.
That's really important.
I think it also is important to know, the staff don't know a lot more. In fact, in a lot of cases, the students know more than the staff. We're gonna give as much information we have to the families just as we are to the staff. So it's not like they're gonna be calmer because they know exactly. We're gonna tell them exactly what we're telling you guys. And so, that's something I'm gonna take back to our director of mental health services and talk to them, like, are these complex tasks something that we can put on our staff in that situation? I don't know. That's a good question.
I have a couple of questions, and one just was piggybacking on what you just said. One of the largest complaints last couple of years, as well as I had a friend move from Wyoming and started working in this public school district, and she thought it was so archaic that they didn't have communication via their phone. And I know that was a huge issue last year. Teachers did not know what was going on because they were completely in the dark. And the Wyoming school district that she worked in, everything was immediately transferred to the teacher's phone. They knew exactly why they were in lockdown or what was happening. It relieved, a lot of stress. And she can't believe that the school district does not have that. That's the first thing. Something maybe, have you been thinking about it?
We've looked at it a bunch of different ones. The thing is, Parent Square actually
It was just
will
an app,
do.
too, by the way.
Yeah, Parent Square will do what we want. There is like Alert One and other apps that we can use. We're looking at trying to use the current platform that we already have for teacher-specific communication. But like I said, everything we know we're going to say over Parent Square. That's a change. Like, one of my first things is like, why are we hiding information? Right? And I know some of it has to do with we're going to always, follow the police department's lead. We don't want to get in the way of any of their investigations by blasting out information that they don't want out. That said, I want to tell parents, staff, students, whatever. Well, students is a little bit more what's appropriate to their age, but students or staff and parents especially, give out all the information we have, because that is going to de-escalate a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody, but it will. I mean, you feel calmer when you know exactly what the reason for the lockdown or the hold or the secure is. And so let's use that tool. And hopefully our staff are already members of Parent Square and that kind of stuff. So we don't have to send out that additional communication to just our staff members. And there is a way to have staff-only Parent Square groups. And we're trying to figure out how to make that work. But my suggestion is sign up for Parent Square as a staff
I feel
member.
that's kind of convoluted with Parent Square. I mean, I feel like there should be an app,
Yeah.
like the Alert app, that's really fast.
Yeah.
That you're just communicating within your school. But that's up to you guys to figure that out. But I just feel like that would alleviate a lot of stress, because that was the biggest complaint I heard from a lot of different people,
Sure.
even teachers.
Yep.
And the second thing, when you say the door is locked, are you talking about those door stopper things that are almost impossible to break open the door? Or are you just talking about the lock that's on this door that you have here?
So we use just our normal door locks, the solid core doors, steel frames. It's going to take a lot to get through one of those.
Is the glass bulletproof?
There's no such thing as bulletproof glass.
Okay. Well, who's to say that someone can't shoot that glass out and open that door?
So there is a security film on it, so if they want to get through the glass, they're going to have to shoot it and rip, tear, destroy it. Like, just shooting the glass isn't going to make it shatter.
But a lot of the elementary schools in our town are not.
So
Opening
Every-
doors.
well, and one
Oh.
thing I can say is, what we also know is that you lose your fine motor skills in moments of stress. Like getting your key out and like putting it in a lock and locking your door is not the most secure way to lock your door when you're under a lot of pressure and stress. And over the summer in this building, they installed switch locks on the inside of every classroom door as a result of the safety recommendations that we have. So in every door that's not a, I mean, this is a different kind of door, that's a bar door, but in every other door, there's a little switch that's on the inside of the classroom that just requires you to go like that, and you can even keep it locked and keep it open. And a lot of teachers do that. They keep their door locked and they use the magnet. We don't have very few classrooms use door stops. There's a magnet that holds the door open. So all they have to do is pull the door shut and it's locked from the inside, which is different than what we had even just last year. Last year you had to actually either go outside and lock it with a key, or there was this little switch thing that you could use on the core part of the door, which is also like fine motor skills. So every building in this district does not have that, but this building does, and so that is an extra safety precaution that we have put in place to address some of those concerns.
That's great. But
Yeah.
the poor elementary schools that are really old, they feel bad then.
We're working on every door lock will have that. I will say every window, even the door windows that are elementary schools, does have the security film on it that you can't just shoot it and shatter it. And that's actually code now for buildings. We have to have that. There has been a school shooting in Arizona or Colorado again where they shut out the front window. It didn't have the film, so they were able to walk into the building. It's going to take some time to get into our classrooms. And we can't create classrooms that are unbreachable. Like I said earlier, never has somebody breached a model classroom or during a school shooting started. Now they have shot through a window and hit a student, but they haven't shot through a window to get into the classroom. Again, time barriers. It's going to take time to get into the building, hopefully in more than 90 seconds.
And then how often will you be practicing just as staff and teachers? Because as we all know, as teachers, you practice. Practice makes perfect, right? So how often is your protocol to practice that? Because you say, oh, within 5 or 7 minutes, that police will be here, but there's a lot of dead people in 5 to 7 minutes. I mean, that takes no time at all to kill a lot of people. So how often will you cut down your time making sure that the 911 is called when you know it's dangerous?
100%. Legally, we have to practice drills once a month, right? We do staff meetings. We did one with our staff. Where part of that was they need to see their space. How do they cut down on time? How do they find that area where kids can get into so they know it? They don't just have to guess on where that is. And they should be practicing every step of the drill every time we do the drill. So it's not just, oh, it's a drill.
Does it have to be with students always, or can it just be teacher and like,
legally,
here's your scenario,
we have to do students once a
go.
month, but we can
Okay.
do more than that with staff. Yeah, just legally, it has to be with students once a month.
And I think we're always, like, there's a balance there, right? It's like in a building, we could create a building with no windows. And then we're in a school with no windows, right? So what's the balance of having a space like Seahome that has these beautiful windows and lots of natural light, and like, what does it feel like to go to school in a building like this? And what's the con of having a beautiful building like this with lots of windows? In the same way, like, we could practice lockdowns really often. And we think about the toll it takes on our community to practice those lockdowns monthly even. Like, we have spent several weeks now preparing students to practice this drill on Friday, and it has been impactful already. There are staff members that are very triggered by this conversation and by the practice around it, and it doesn't mean that we don't do it. We do it, but they still need to practice it because we all need to know what to do, but that like emotional load of thinking about it, I mean, you thinking about it right now. It's really hard. And then you like amplify that every so often by practicing a lockdown, and it's terrifying. So we're also striking that balance of like, how do we be really clear, make the instructions very understandable, practice it, and then also continue to like do all the other things that help mitigate risk. Or mitigate threat, I should say. Like, how do we take care of each other? How do we teach kids, when you see something suspicious, say something. When you have a gut feeling about something, talk to somebody. Because those are all the pieces that also go into safety in a school, in addition to just the like, let's practice this drill. So I hear you, and I think it's also, there's this balance between like the humanity that we all have and like that feeling of like, we can be here every day and be regulated to learn, and we need to be prepared for something that we don't ever want to have to go through. So, are there other questions? We have maybe time for one more.
So, just a real quick one. Is
Yeah.
this gonna be available on Parent Square so I can talk to my wife about it?
Yeah,
Share it?
so this whole thing is recorded. I'll send it out on Parent Square. I'll also include a link to the I Love You Guys Foundation website. So if you wanted to do some deeper looking into that website and seeing what is there, you're welcome to do that. And I'm also gonna link to the video that we made during Anchor today with students, because it has the Q&A afterwards, and you get to see exactly what students walked through during Anchor as well. So you'll get to see all of those pieces. It's a great question.
And really quick,
Yeah.
last year or a couple years ago, it was like, it was so emotional and like, my daughter's like, everyone's leaving, can I just leave? So how are they, you got that figured out like after the stressful time and kids just leave?
Are you talking about during an event or like post a drill or post a lockdown?
Post lockdown, I just remember it was like the whole couple weeks was stressful and
Yeah.
everyone was leaving.
Sure. We will never tell a kid they have to stay in school after a drill or a lockdown if they can't do that. Like, that is a very challenging thing to have to experience if you're not ready to go on with your day. So, for sure.
It was probably harder for kids that didn't have cars.
Yeah.
Like, really, they were probably really stressed out about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing, I just want to end on this too, is like, this lockdown is a really specific, very narrow protocol. It is only used when there is a threat inside the school that we know about.
You'll be
In the
practicing other
past,
ones?
yeah, in the past, we used it because it's the only one we had.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have the other one, which is much more calming and reassuring. We can give more information. There's a lot more room to get your needs met in a hold than there is in a lockdown. So the times we would use a lockdown are very narrow and hopefully never. The times we'd use a hold, you know, maybe in 4 years of your kid being at C-Home, they might experience a hold. I hope they don't. But like, if they do, it's much more likely they would experience that than a lockdown. So that's also relieving, you know, to be like, okay, we actually have a different protocol that we can lean on.
And that's also why I say the secure is probably the one we'll use the most. We have a little bit more control within our building. We can't control what those people outside on the street do. I mean, we had a bank robbery at Carl Crozer that put us in a secure. We had a shooting over by Shuckson that put us in a secure. Those kiddos were safe. We kept them safe. I can't control the whole community. I can't even control what's in the school, but a little bit more power. So just know this is a very rare occurrence.
Would we have had a lockdown last year?
No.
At all? It wouldn't have
Yeah.
even been, okay.
No.
Last year was a really, like I said, it was a great experience to be able to see the process, but it was weird and it shouldn't ever really happen. Somebody in Ethiopia calling it just it shouldn't.
All right, thank you. I know that is a really heavy hour of your time. If you have other questions that pop up when you leave or whatever, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll answer them as best we can or direct you to someone who can answer them. And thank you very much.
Everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Was it Emery?